I don't think this happens unless Georgia plays Alabama in the SEC title game. Look, if this just happened to be a down year for Bama, they didn't make it into the playoff, Georgia probably wins the national championship going away. I don't think there was anybody else out there in the football universe, as we witnessed from their Michigan blowout, that could have run with Georgia's defense this year and Georgia's team overall, except Bama. And except the coach of the other sideline, Nick Saban. That was the one team that could do it. But if they were going to match up in the playoff, if they're going to match up in the national championship game, Georgia needed to play them prior. And when you think about it, boy, it all came together. Because Georgia already was into the college football playoff, no matter what happened at Atlanta. And they got to see Alabama. And they got to wear a blowout against Alabama. And they could use it as their ammunition last night. If last night was the first time they had played the Tide this year, Georgia loses that football game. And here's why. The Bama thing is a real thing. It's, can we beat Bama? We think we can beat Bama, but you can't really do it until you're there. And when you get there, Saban always has his guys hungry, always has his guys focused, always has his guys in big spots, backs against the wall, as well coached, as well prepared as anybody. Okay? As well coached as any team ever. And so when you match up against them, you can watch film, you can go through highlights, you can look at the rosters, you can do all of this research, and it doesn't matter until you get on that field. Because those guys, that Bama team, has a different switch in big games, and they're always exactly where they needed to be. So Georgia was great this year. Their defense was historically great. They gave up an average of 7 points per game. But until you play Alabama, you can't figure it. It happened against Bama in the title game in 2017. It happened the next year in the SEC title game, and it happened again a month ago. Georgia was really good. Georgia thought they were ready. Georgia knew, roster-wise, we're as good as Bama, if not better. They built a 10-point lead in that SEC title game. But the wheels came off. Bryce Young started making huge plays. Wide open space in the middle of the field. Bama made big plays, scored big points, and Bryce Young had the quarter of his life and won the Heisman because of it. And Georgia's head was spinning. They realized Stetson Bennett can't lead us from a comeback. We don't have a high potent offense here. And our defense, who had slammed everybody the entire year, had its head spinning. What the hell just happened? Kirby wasn't ready for that. The defense wasn't ready for Bryce Young. Stetson Bennett wasn't ready for that moment. None of it. It was all too much for Georgia right there. And they got their butts handed to them. And unless that happens, last night doesn't happen. Georgia took so much from that loss, from that experience, and from the way that they lost. One thing I noticed, which my antenna went up last week, Stetson Bennett was continually asked, obviously, about his disaster against Bama in the SEC title game and what was going to be different, if it was going to be different, if he thought he was good enough to be different. And Stetson had said, now I've seen him. Now I know what I'm up against. Now I don't have the nerves. Now, if you watch last night's game, Stetson Bennett had plenty of nerves early. Stetson Bennett is a walk-on football player who dreamt of playing at Georgia. To be in a national championship game was clearly emotionally overwhelming for him. That's why we saw tears on the sideline. It's clearly tears of joy, but it's also tears of relief. this enormous pressure that he was the weak link on a national championship team for a program and a fan base in a state that hadn't tasted that in 41 years was a rock on his shoulders, and he knew it, and it suffocated him in Atlanta. And coming out last night, he was also nervous. But when it changed unbelievably was the turnover. Up until that point, Stetson Bennett is trying not to lose the football game. If you watch last night, defense is playing so well. They're holding Alabama to field goals. The offense of Georgia is doing almost nothing. He's not taking any shots downfield. It's all underneath stuff. It's all just straight ahead. And then Bennett commits the biggest gaffe in national championship history if the Georgia Bulldogs don't win. He's just trying to get it away, don't take a big loss, throw it away. He fumbles it as he throws it because he can't even get his hand around a good pass to throw it out of bounds. It doinks on the field. Alabama casually, nonchalantly picks up the bouncing football and just ticks the foot inbounds to recover it. It looks like an incomplete pass or recovered out of bounds. It's neither. It's a turnover, and now Bama, with 10 minutes to play, goes ahead at a touchdown from 16 yards out. You couldn't gift them a better 6 points. Until that point, Stetson Bennett was trying not to lose this football game. I can't be the guy that loses this. I can't be the reason. And then that happens, and he followed it up with the 40-yard rope to Mitchell for the touchdown. And that's when Stetson Bennett decided, instead of not losing this game, I've got to try to help win it because I just puked away a touchdown. Bennett needed to see Alabama a month ago. He needed to wear that over the course of this last month. He needed to have a moment where it was maybe not thinking, just playing. Because against Bama last time, a month ago, was too much thinking. That Georgia defense was so much better than they showed in Atlanta. They needed a month to sit on that. They knew they were better than that. And they came out against Michigan, and they refused to give up a score. They nearly pitched a shutout against the Wolverines, the number 2 team of the country. Nearly pitched a shutout. That defense wanted the rematch because they had worn an embarrassment for a month. It wasn't a close loss. It wasn't a 16-13 or a 10-6, and the Georgia defense could say, hey, we did our job. No. Nobody did their job a month ago, which is what had to happen for last night for that Georgia defense to play like that. If you like defense and you admire the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens, the 02 Buccaneers, the 13 Seahawks, these great defenses and some of the great Alabama defenses as well, you have to love that Georgia defense. That Georgia defense was all over the place, and they picked one another up. Every play, they picked one another up. Fly to the football, fly to Bryce Young, be in the backfield, sack the quarterback, create deflections and knockdowns. I mean, one of the things, it was a small thing, but I loved it. Bryce Young would take a shot downfield. It'd get tapped away by a Georgia defender, and they wouldn't even look for the flag. They knew it wasn't a flag. They knew, I didn't touch him. I'm that good. That pass rush hit Bryce Young every single time he dropped back to pass. I love a night like that. They made Bryce Young earn every yard. They blocked a field goal. They held him to all field goals. They nearly had their own scoop and score early, deemed an incomplete pass. And when they finally broke and gave up the touchdown, it was because they could only defend 16 yards. They were brilliant, and they had to go through what they did a month ago. They had to finally do it. And Kirby needed to see Saban. He needed to see Alabama. Lanning needed to see Alabama. They all needed to see Alabama once on film a month ago to say, we got to do this differently, that differently. That game gave them fuel. It gave them motivation. It gave them film. And for Stetson Bennett, it washed away the nerves, at least for a quarter. He finally got there late. He convinced himself, finally. It had to happen that way. It was the only way it was going to work for Georgia. Whew. That was a hell of a game. Hell of a championship game. It reminded me a lot of that Clemson-Alabama game where Deshaun Watson finally got over the hump. It takes so much to beat Alabama. It takes so much. And Bama may as well be in the national championship game again a year from now because they're going to be more experienced. They were young this year. It takes so much to beat Alabama that when you do it, you know it's a really special day. Clemson did that twice. You know it's just all of the stars have to align, and they did for the Bulldogs. And if you were going to win a national championship 41 years later, it had to be like that. Grats to the Dogs. Hit me up if you're a Bulldogs fan celebrating today at 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227, on Twitter, DA on CBS. Student never defeats the teacher against Nick Saban. Finally did it last night.